what is happening with the debate over the new Constitution as opposed to the Confederation? You remember? Can they agree to revise the Articles of Confederation? Or do they decide they have to throw the whole thing out? Under the Articles, who has more power? You remember? The states. If you're going to be a united nation, like the United States should be, then you have 13 sovereign states and expect them to work together and under one government. It's not realistic. It's not going to happen. So you've got a problem, and you're deadlocked, especially on representation, because you have higher populations in the north because that's where all the cities are. Ben Franklin comes up with a compromise. He is the precursor to the other great compromiser who was named Clay. Does the name Henry Clay mean anything to anybody? So he is the precursor to Henry Clay. So he comes up with a compromise. He explains that every state has 2 senators, which gives them the same amount in that house, and they will be appointed every 6 years. The lower house can initiate money bills and will be selected by population. For every 30,000 people, there's one representative. And the issue of slavery, of course, isn't really an issue yet, but they will help out the South by saying, and we'll even let you count each slave as 3/5 of a person. Now, obviously, it's not, you cannot take a slave and chop him into 5 pieces. Well, you could, but why would you do that? So this is really going to, it'll help the South because it ups their population. How many 3/5 of a slave would you have to have a whole slave?
2.5? I don't know. That's not my strong. I'm in retard math right now.
3/5. So you need 2/5 of another slave to get 5/5. So it's about 2.1 slaves, I guess, somewhere along there. I'm good at math, so. At the end of August, the convention is ready to approve the first draft of the Constitution, or excuse me, the 5th or 6th draft, because they've gone through many, and they're ready to approve it. But it still has to go to the states. So the president is in the executive branch, and he will be chosen every 4 years by the Electoral College. Basically, what is the Electoral College? When you go to vote, you vote for delegates who will in turn go to the Electoral College and vote for that person to become president. You don't vote for the president. You vote for the guys that vote for the president. Granted, they're going to be, oh boy, we're going to vote for this guy because, we really like him. They're not going to say, yeah, I'm for Bush, and then go and vote for Obama. This is an example. They won't do that. It's called party loyalty.
Do we know our delegates?
I mean, the delegates that we send, you can find out. It's public information.
Why don't they get, I guess, more public?
I don't know, lobbyists don't really get a lot of publicity either, and they basically run Congress. So.
That's true.
Don't you just love the way I enjoy bashing the government? Alright, the president has certain powers. They have command over the armed forces. There's a big stink over presidents that have never served in the military. I think if you're going to be president, you should be required to serve in the military. Woodrow Wilson was a pacifist. Should have never been president because he was a pacifist. They don't like war or violence or anything. They can conduct diplomatic relations. Like they can go to Saudi Arabia and try to squeeze more oil out of them. They can nominate judges and officials in the executive branch. They choose Supreme Court candidates. So, but the Senate has to, in the end, approve them. You ever remember the Anita Hill, Clarence something or other, a few years ago? Clarence Thomas, is that his name? And he was up for his Supreme Court justice. And she came forward saying that he had sexually harassed her and everything. It turns out she really did have an affair with a guy. And he dumped her for a younger girl or something. So she was just trying to, get back at him. He didn't get appointed, so, he probably didn't have a chance either because he already had one African American on the Supreme Court. So, but he can also veto all the congressional legislature or legislation that comes through. Like the Warner bill was vetoed a couple of times before it went through. You have the judicial branch, which is made up of we were just talking about it,
Supreme Court.
Supreme Court, and you have the legislative branch, which is the House and the Senate. Each state will also have an upper and a lower house, and an executive, which will be the what? Governor, right? And they have the power to tax and to regulate trade. So when you get your tax bill, you have the legislative branch to thank for that. So you might want to say hello to them with one finger. Remember watching Jeff Dunham?
Yeah.
And when they were in Washington D.C. and Walter said he stood in front of the IRS and flipped them off. Yeah, you can do that. Because it's not against the law.
Flip somebody off?
No, to flip off the IRS building.
Oh.
It's not against the law, so it's a building for Under the Constitution, the powers of state legislatures will be limited. Under the Articles of Confederation, were there limits placed on state powers? Was the document flawed?
Yeah.
Because it gave the states too much power and the central government not enough power. They can't levy duties on trade. That's something only the head of the country can do. They can't coin money or issue paper money. What was the problem after the Revolutionary War with all these states issuing their own money? What happens if you went from North Carolina to Virginia? What would you have to do?
Get Virginia money.
You have to get Virginia money. Yeah, it created a job for somebody, but still. You have to trade your money. It's like if you went to Paris or Spain. You'd have to trade American for euros.
I know that usually
Right. You can figure out how to do the transition. There's a...
in Paris, it's always, like, our money's not worth much to them, but whenever I went to Mexico, like, our money was worth so much more to them, and they didn't want their money, they wanted our money.
Mhm.
And you could talk them down to, like, $5 for nothing.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It's so much fun.
One of my friends went to Haiti after the earthquake, and people were so desperate for money that, and he said this happened to one of the adults that was with him. They offered to sell them their child
Wow.
for American money so they could buy food. Of course, they said no. Gave them money instead. And food. So, worked out good. They can also not conduct foreign affairs. Whose job is that under the new Constitution? It's the national government's job. Like the Vietnam War. If the states had had the same rights they had under the Articles of Confederation, you probably wouldn't have had a Vietnam War. Because there's no way states are going to send their troops overseas. And they couldn't draft because if the states had sovereignty, then the government had no right to draft. They're going to declare that the Constitution is the supreme law of the land. Duh. We know this now. But it's a document. It's flawed. The very beginning of the document is flawed, in that we, the people, in order to form a more perfect union. What's wrong with that statement?
Can't be more perfect.
It can't be more perfect. It's either perfect or it's not. They wanted this to sound, ooh. They wanted it to be, oh wow, this is just, the bomb. I guess back then it would be the cannonball, if they didn't have bombs. This is the cannonball, So if you had the whoop whoops, they would have done that. So they probably hurt you a lot. So there's a flaw in the beginning. It's written on paper. Is it perfect? No, it's not. Is it working? It's working so far. All the states are going to have to ratify this. In order to have it ratified, every state has to ratify it. You can't have one holdout and ratify this document. The Federalists don't like this document. They're afraid that with this document, people's individual rights will be trampled. Wonder where that's leading us to. They're afraid that by expanding the government's power, expanding over everybody, will cause corruption and hurt everything. They're afraid it's going to lead to a new aristocracy. They're afraid that if the country gets too big, it's going to separate the legislators from the people they're representing. Do they have a legitimate beef here? Yes, they do. That's why they got rid of the Articles of Confederation. The Anti-Federalists want a Bill of Individual Rights. Where are we going with this now? Bill of Rights for the nation. Not state by state by state, but the nation. James Madison agrees. They promised that if they ratify the Constitution, that they will put in a Bill of Rights. And they do. So they do what they said they're going to do. So it's ratified. And Rhode Island is going to be the last holdout on ratifying the document. And they will finally ratify it in May of 1790. Why do you think Rhode Island is the one that's holding out? How big is Rhode Island? It's big. Yeah, I'm being facetious, but so they're holding out for population reasons. But the Bill of Rights, we know, are tacked on to the Constitution, and they're there to look pretty today, as our rights are trampled on a daily basis. Yeah. So these amendments are the legacy of the Anti-Federalists. Within one generation, Americans will declare independence 2 times from Britain. Once with the Declaration, once with the Constitution. They will cement that freedom with the Constitution and not the Articles of Confederation. And it says, in the book, it says this, and I just want your take on it. The Constitution represents a triumph of imagination and common sense. What do you think that statement means? Whose pamphlet had all these guys read? And what was it called?
Common Sense.
Common Sense, right. So, Thomas Paine, John Locke, whose imagination concocted that it's a government's job to take care of its people if they give up certain rights. That's what that means, in a sense. We have several things that we want: limiting power to the executive branch, preserving sovereignty of the state, as well as being part of the union. So what happens to the creed of civic virtue? People realize that Americans would not sacrifice private interest for the public welfare. Would you really expect people to do that? People are selfish by nature. The Constitution will introduce that interest rather than virtue shapes human behavior. For example, 5 of you are trapped on an island, and there's only enough food for 4 of you. And one person must be kicked away in order for you to survive. Are you going to volunteer? No. But people are not going to voluntarily give up anything because it's the virtuous thing to do. So what happens? What will the future bring? The anti-federalists are going to think that common people have more virtue than gentlemen. Are they right? What corrupts? Money. They're afraid that these gentlemen will swallow up all the power. No, they wouldn't do that, would they? And this new Constitution will reflect fears that still plague common Americans today. Anybody here completely understand the Constitution? I think the common person can understand the language of the Constitution. They can't. It was designed that way on purpose. It's just like the clergy with the Middle Ages. They were the only ones that could read, so they could control everybody's lives. In 1791, there was a whiskey tax that was passed, and it was not popular. Is any tax popular? No, but this one was really hated. What does everybody make out of their corn? If they can't transport corn to market, and they can make this whiskey and put it in jugs and sell it and get money, do they want to pay taxes on that? Nope. They already pay land taxes. I'm sure they pay some other taxes. It's going to tax any distilled spirits made by private citizens. It doesn't say anything about breweries. It doesn't tax them. It just taxes the individual. This is still true today. I know somebody that has a moonshine still. Had a moonshine still. Barney Fife came in and powed it because they weren't getting tax money on it. By midsummer of 1794, people have ignored this tax. How can you force a tax on something that you may or may not know is being done? You can't. So by midsummer of 1794, a marshal shows up to serve a summons on a farmer that has not been paying taxes on these illegal liquors that are being made. So they get to this one guy named William Miller. They hand the bill for $250. Imagine $250 in 1794. Would Ben Franklin have had $250 in 1794? Nope. And he was a pretty with it kind of guy. He had money. So this isn't going to go well. So this guy Neville, who was the general or like the tax collector of the area, goes with this guy to serve it. And he'd already been chased off some people's farms for trying to collect these taxes, which is why they sent in another guy to do it. Now, the other farmers find out that Neville and this new guy are there trying to take $250 from their buddy, and they show up after hitting the old jug with guns and pitchforks and those big things you do this with. Yes, those things. And they're not there to have a party. A few hours later, after these two guys managed to escape, The militia shows up and marches on that guy Neville's house. They don't like Neville. He's the one that's trying to take their money. So they are all intoxicated. And they go to his house to tar and feather him, essentially. That's one of the worst things that can happen to you. But once that tar dries, in order to get it off, you have to take skin with it. Unless you can get in the water as hot as you can possibly stand it. And that's about bad. Neville and his slaves managed to hold them off. And so the guys kind of say, okay, we don't have enough people. Let's go get the other guys and we'll come back. The next day, a larger group of militia go back to Neville's house and find that he has fled his home with his slaves and his family and gone to Fort Pitt. Instead, when they get to the house, they find that the house is filled with soldiers. So it's a bait and switch. Instead of fighting the slaves and Neville and their 3, 4, 5-year-old with guns, they're fighting full-grown soldiers now. So they tell the soldiers to get out of the house, to surrender, or they're going to burn the house down with them in it. And the soldiers, of course, don't want to die for this guy because they don't like him either, because he taxes them like crazy. So they surrender, they leave the house, and then they burn down all the outbuildings in the house and everything. So after this, you will have what are called liberty poles erected all around, and they have flags that say liberty and no excise. So they're saying, don't tax our liquor, essentially. Now, in 1790, you have the very first national census, and there are 4 million people. I repeat, there are 4 million people. Most people are living on the eastern seaboard. Not everybody's brave enough to go over the mountains yet. It's not civilized enough yet. You have 100,000 people living in the Tennessee, Kentucky area. Cumberland Gap, places like that. You have some people that are brave enough that are moving north of the Ohio River, which is right on the tippy top of Kentucky. Right here. You have some people up here, but at this point it's mostly Native American populations. So you have a census. There are 4 million white Anglo-Saxon Protestants, white people. They don't count the Indians and they don't count the African Americans, so we can't know exactly how many of these two ethnic groups are left. In 1790, they estimate that there are about 3/4 million black Americans living in the United States. That's an estimate. And 90% live in the South. There are mostly 5 tribes that will dominate the southern area. The Creek, the Cherokee, the Choctaw, Chickasaw, and the Seminoles. And to the north of the Ohio River, you have something called the Miami Confederacy. The natural population will grow or double every 22 years. You have people living longer. You no longer have indentured servants, but you have a lot of immigrants. So, what do they mean when the population doubles naturally? Yeah. People having kids, those kids growing up having kids, da-da-da-da-da. If you don't know the mechanics, take a biology class. Or the stork reason. The new population is primarily in the rural areas. If all the land is owned on the seaboard, where are people forced to go to buy land? They have to go here. Don't forget, we haven't gotten this yet. This won't come until Thomas Jefferson comes along. But right now, everybody has to go here, and it's like swim at your own risk without a lifeguard. Sort of like that. By 1800, 89% of families in the United States are into agriculture. Is that a shock to anybody? No, that was, there are some jobs, but most people are farmers. You still have a lot of transportation problems. You can't really get information anywhere with any amount of speed. You can't haul things. Do we have railroads yet? No. Do we have paved roads? Do we have bus trucks? No, we don't. So it's hard to get things to where they need to go. So everything is slow. You don't have a postal system yet. So your letter might or might not reach Aunt Frida in New York from West Tennessee. Roads, for lack of a better term. Anybody ever been up to Warriors where they have the truck tracks that drive up into the woods behind the soccer field? That's the extent of the road system back then. And if you did get a newspaper, it was probably about 3 months old. Especially if you lived on the other side of the mountains. You have what's called a semi-subsistence economy in the backcountry. And this guy, and I cannot say his last name, in 1759 he moved to the Hudson River Valley to study the semi-subsistence culture. Anybody want to take a guess at what semi-subsistence means? Subsistence means what? You grow enough to survive. Semi-subsistence means you grow enough to survive and a little more to sell, basically. In 1783, there's a letter published he publishes Letters from an American Farmer, in which he asks the question, what then is an American, this new man? So, are the rich people the real Americans, or are the semi-subsistence farmers the real Americans? He's going to also notice some things about the backcountry. The backward, keep in mind it's supposed to be backward because it's not civilized. He's going to notice something that's going on there that's not going on the coast. There's a sense of equality. But not for everybody, just for men. There's widespread equality. You might have some people that have a little more than others, but across the board, people have pretty much the same thing. So there's that level playing field. The very conditions under which they live sort of force the equality. You survive as best you can. There's lots of land. You have access to land. You can make a decent living if you work hard. Is that still true today? Yeah, hard might be mental labor. It might be physical labor. And the population does not have that rift between the rich and the poor. So, is it more equal? In a sense, it's a utopia, in a way. In the backcountry, everything is produced on the farm. There are a few things that aren't, but 98% of things that you need were done on the farm. Women are the center of surviving out west. They make candles. What do they make candles out of, I think? What kind of wax? Beeswax, right. My father-in-law used to keep bees. And every time it was time for us to go over and help him bottle the honey, he would rob the bees and always want me to help him. And I can't because I'm allergic to bees. So it was not safe just for me being there doing the honey slinging thing. So he would always say, yeah, let's go rob the bees. And I'd be like, you know, if I do that, I'll be that big around, like the blueberry girl in Willy Wonka. So, except I won't be blue, I'll be gray, because I won't be breathing. So the women are making everything. So not only do they keep the bees, but they make candles out of the wax, so they eat the honey. Yeah, they eat the honey. They make the soap. Remember I brought in lye soap the other day. It didn't smell as good as that, because it was made out of ashes and hog renderings and grease and stuff like that. You still want the recipe, I got it. They make their own clothes. Not everybody can afford cotton, so they'll make it out of something called flax, F-L-A-X, and it's very itchy. It don't smell good. And they make their own hats. Why are hats important? You keep protection from the sun. My father-in-law was notorious for wearing long-sleeve shirts in the middle of summer and pants. And I would go there, I'd have on shorts, you know, short-sleeve t-shirt, flip-flops, sandals, whatever. He'd say, why are you not covered up? The sun's going to eat you alive. Well, I'm fine. Yeah. But he wore long sleeves because that's what they had done when he was growing up. My grandmother was the same way. She would go out in long sleeves. She'd go out in capris a lot, or pedal pushers as she called them, but most of the time she wore long sleeves when she was out in the sun. You have something in the backcountry called a barter economy. I repeat, a barter economy. What do I mean when I say that?
Trade livestock and stuff for other livestock and things.
Right. Erica makes candles. Her husband keeps bees. She makes beautiful beeswax candles that when they burn, they smell just like candles, and that's the best smell in the world. Shane doesn't have a wife yet. He needs candles, but he knows that she needs flax so she can make some clothes for her kids. So what are they going to do? They're going to exchange. Then maybe later on, he'll have something else that Erica needs, and they'll trade a couple jars of honey for a new grinding stone or something. Have you ever tried to, I've done this, if you've ever tried to grind corn with a grinding stone like this, you not only get corn, but you get rocks, which is why people's teeth go down to that. Now, the people in the backcountry are going to look to the Native Americans to figure out how to survive. What was the big problem when the men came to Jamestown? They didn't have any women. What do women do in the Native American culture? They raise the food. They laughed at these guys. Who's going to grow their food? They don't have any women. You know, they laughed at them. The men would hunt and fish and work the fields. But the women provide the base of the food. In the native cultures, they're sedentary, but yet they can move if they have to. Like, have you ever seen Dances with Wolves? Okay, you know when they get ready to go to their winter camp, how they keep that camp like there, and then they go get the buffalo and then they come back. Yeah, it's sort of like that. So they can move if they have to, but in the summer they mostly do crop cultivation. Now, Ben Franklin and the guys on the coast don't want a barter economy. They don't want a semi-subsistence economy. They want a commercial economy. How had Britain gotten all its power? What had they been doing with stuff they had been making? They've been selling it to people. So Franklin and the founding fathers want to do the same thing. Now, if you lived on the other side of the mountains, chances are you have a commercial economy. You have more access to money. You have more access to markets. You have more access to goods that are being brought in by Britain, France, Portugal, and whoever else. Of course, we will mean molasses because they make what with molasses?
Some sort of liquor.
Rum, right. So, in the East, you have a commercial economy. So you have artisans, which are like leather tanners, shoemakers or cobblers, haberdashers. What are haberdashers make? Different things like that. You have merchants, you have some farmers. You always want to have farmers around cities because that's where the market gets the stuff that they sell. So they're going to live off the money they make, and they're going to depend on others to provide stuff they need to survive. Can they do that in the backcountry? No. If they don't grow their own food, they don't eat. If they don't cut their own firewood, they freeze to death. Here you can buy firewood. There are people that specialize in firewood delivery. So, everything's provided. They need to be able to get goods from right outside the cities into the cities so they can keep the price low, so they can jack the price up when they sell it and make a big old fat profit. You can't ship things overland because it's too expensive. What shape are the roads in? What roads? So it's expensive to send things. But if you live near the coast, you're going to have better roads and things like that. But in the backcountry, you're not going to have this. Let's talk about Ben Franklin. He was a self-made man. What do I mean by that?
He was basically self-taught.
He basically made a name for himself, like Dillinger. Except he killed people and robbed banks, but it's the same concept. He was an apprentice's runaway. He was a printing apprentice, and he ran away, and he went to Philadelphia. He was a hard worker. He was intelligent. He was curious. He was a thinker. He was a philosopher. He was an all-around smart guy, even though he did like to go out and fly kites in the lightning storm. I wouldn't suggest doing this now. This would be bad. So he will end up writing something called Poor Richard's Almanac, which is still in production today. Of course, Benjamin Franklin don't write it. He retired a few years ago, so he doesn't write it anymore. He was a printer. This is how he makes his living. And this is going to come in handy when it comes time to print up documents, copies of important documents like old Declaration of Independence, Bill of Rights, the Constitution, legislation, things like that. So does he have a monetary investment? He does. He wants a commercial and market economy because he feels the only way the United States will succeed is if they have this. He's right and he's wrong. It could have gone either way. So you have the French guy in his egalitarian or his equal America and Franklin's marketplace America kind of, pushing back and forth. But Franklin, of course, will win out because commercialism will always win out.
I was watching something on History Channel, and I don't know if this is true. Well, I would hope so if it's on History Channel, but it was said that Benjamin Franklin used to smoke pot.
They all did.
They would make their clothes out of hemp and stuff, and the money was made on hemp. I thought that was
Marijuana is not deemed illegal until like the 1920s.
Yeah.
When they first started making Coca-Cola, they put real cocaine in it. Talk about a way to get somebody hooked on your product. Here, try Coke. Sure. I need some now. Yeah, but all the founding fathers smoked marijuana.
That's one word always told me. I didn't believe him, and I saw that on History Channel. I was like, man, he knew what he's talking about.
Yeah, so, there are no new concepts in history. I'm sorry, but the hippies were not the first ones to realize you could smoke marijuana. The Aztecs used marijuana. They used other mind-altering drugs, peyote, a form of acid that they would make. How do you think they got those victims to lay still while they ripped their heart out? They're not going to lay there and be like, yeah, go ahead, I'm just going to lay here and be cool with you killing me. No, they're tripping. Like that, so Tom Cruise produced that movie about the Aztecs a few years ago. It was Mel Gibson produced it. I can't think of the name of it, that's about the Aztecs and about the Spaniards showing up. I can't. But anyway, it showed.
Are you talking about a apocalyptic?
That's it. Yeah, that's it. They showed this one scene where they're cutting out the heart to offer the heart to Quetzalcoatl, I think is how you say his name. But when you become a dog stone, you're not going to lay there and just let somebody kill you. You've ever seen a movie, The Blue Lagoon? Mm-hmm. You know when they're doing that thing there, and the guy, they bring him out, and he's like struggling, but he's like this, and he's stoned. They've given him some kind of concoction so that they can rip his heart out and offer it to the skull dude on the island. Nobody in their right mind is going to lay there and let you kill him. They would even drug the prisoners that they would offer in the Aztec, in the Mayan cultures. If somebody's high, they're going to be more compliant. So, and I mean, they had tobacco, but you know, they smoked marijuana too. Hemp was a big money maker. You still have a lot of rope made out of hemp today. Just think the money they make if they make marijuana legal.
California's making a buttload.
Bye-bye, national debt. So, yeah, it's not, yeah, you're right, they did smoke marijuana. They also, if they ate the right kind of bread at the right time with the right kind of mold, they went on acid trips. Like during the Salem witch trials. So who's going to lead this new country? Who's going to be the big guy? So the electoral college will unanimously elect George Washington as president. The first elected president. However, he's not the first president. He's president number 7. The first guy's name is John Hanson. He is the president of the United States in Congress assembled. This guy ran the country before George Washington did. So there's a difference. Hanson was the first president. Washington was the first elected president. Make sure you can distinguish between those two, because I have a feeling you're going to see that again.
How did that guy get to be president? Like, did he just like say, hey,
They nominated people, then they did a vote. And that's how they picked the leader. So, yeah. So 6 other men will serve before Washington is elected in 1788. So Washington is not the first president. And if anybody ever says that to you, say no. The first president was John Hanson. Washington was the first elected president. I had one of my students last spring. This spring we just had. She told her little girl in like 2nd grade, that George Washington wasn't the first president of the United States. And she's like, well, Mommy, that's what teacher said. And no, he wasn't. He was the first elected president. So this little girl goes in and tells her teacher, my mommy was telling me that George Washington was not the first president of the United States, that he was the first elected president of the United States. She got in trouble. So the mom went in, took my notes. I do believe you owe me an apology. You ought to switch to another question. So if you tell your children this, don't tell them to go in and do this, because they'll get in trouble. George Washington is the only president to ever be unanimously elected. Why is he unanimously elected? What's he given credit for? Winning what? No. Revolutionary War. How many battles did he win? How many did he fight? 9. Was he the best choice for the job? Thank God he had a great cabinet. That's all I got to say about that. George Washington was a weird kind of guy. He was very remote and didn't want people to get to know him because he smelled horrible around the mouth area. He had horrible gum disease. His teeth had fallen out at an early age. I'm thinking it's karma from chopping down the cherry tree. But he had horrible, horrible odor. He'd ride around with a flask full of mint water. Or like scope, I guess. He was very stiff. He was very tall. He was like 6'5". Very tall, very handsome man. Except for the whole smell thing. You couldn't get a read on the guy. You know how usually you walk up to somebody and get a read on about how they are? This guy was like a statue. You couldn't really get to know him. I'm pretty sure even his wife didn't even know him that well. But he just would not talk to anybody because of his crazy. You stink, get a Tic Tac, dude. Or something like that. They had Tic Tacs. He has no close friends. He doesn't want anybody to know a whole lot about him. He loved to dress up. Remember how he showed up at the First Continental Congress? Full uniform. And he loves large formal receptions as long as he doesn't have to mingle with anybody. So, on one hand, he doesn't like anybody looking at him. On the other hand, he's like, here, look at me. I can throw these big parties. In his little wig and his little knee breeches and his stockings and all that stuff. He doesn't want to be president, but he accepts the honor of becoming president. He wants to be a military person. And we've learned that that's not his cup of tea. And he does not have a big drive for power. He never did the whole time he was president. He let everybody else do. He was one of these things. You know, he was a puppet leader. Congress right away will make 4 departments for 4 cabinet positions, as they're known now. The Treasury, the War Department, the State Department, and the Attorney General. Why do you need a Treasury Department? Who's going to control the money, right? Why do you need a State Department? You have to have that liaison between the federal government and the state. Don't you love that word, liaison? This is a great word. Why do you need a War Department? Yeah, we're going to be going to war again in about 10 years. Yeah, we are. We're still at war with the Indians because they're on our property. You just don't know it. Who's doing the news? And why do you need an Attorney General? Who's going to prosecute federal cases? So if you have somebody tried for treason, which is a federal offense, you have to have somebody to prosecute it, i.e. Attorney General. They're appointed with the consent of the Senate. Washington says, these are the guys I want, let's talk about it. Oh, by the way, here's some cookies, and a pretty wig for your wife, and here's your kid a toy that I made, you know, and all that stuff. So he sat down and he thought. He said, these are the guys I want for my cabinet. As Secretary of Treasury, he chooses Alexander Hamilton. What other thing is famous about Alexander Hamilton? Remember?
His little spat with the governor of New York, Aaron Burr.
What happened?
Alexander offended Burr somehow, and Burr challenged him to a duel.
Actually, he was a vice president.
Oh, yeah.
Later, I'm sorry, go ahead. Never mind.
And he challenged him to a duel, and Alexander Hamilton was shot and killed, and Burr had to run away.
So Aaron Burr was killed Alexander Hamilton. And there's a peanut butter or milk commercial thing about that. You've ever seen it? It's funny. Aaron Burr, like that. It's funny. He's going to choose Thomas Jefferson as the head of the State Department. Jefferson was well liked by everybody, including his slaves, especially his kids. All of them. Edmund Randolph will be the first Attorney General, and Henry Knox will be the first Secretary of War. I would know those. Probably see those again. At least a couple of them. while the Constitution creates a federal Supreme Court, it doesn't create a justice system for what's underneath. So you have the Judiciary Act of 1789 that is passed to remedy this problem. You have Supreme Court justices, 6 of them. Why is 6 a bad number? It's an even number. You cannot have an even number of Supreme Court justices expecting them to get done. Can't happen. You gotta have somebody break the tie. It's going to establish 13 federal district courts, 3 courts of appeal, and in Washington will appoint John Jay as the first Chief Justice. Now, think back. Who went to negotiate with Spain about letting us use the Mississippi River? Is this a good choice? His negotiation skills are lax, to say the very least. Hamilton has to start from scratch. He has to build a Treasury Department. He has 2 main goals. If I'm not mistaken, I think that might be one of your... That's the other bit. That's the other guy. He wanted to use federal power to encourage manufacturing and commerce and give the U.S. a strong economy so that we can maintain our independence from Europe. Pretty good goal, don't you think? Do we want Britain coming back in and taking over? No, they're probably going to punish us pretty bad after we beat them so bad. He also wants to link the interests of the wealthy to those in the new government. What's the problem with that right there? If you've got the wealthy being able to influence the government, what about the little guy down here? They're not going to get anything. There are 2 things that are going to be in his way, and they are big hurdles, like trying to jump over Mount Rainier. No revenue or credit. Have we borrowed money to go to war with Britain when we got our independence? We're in debt, so if you're in debt, can you get credit? If we don't have revenue, then we have no way of making money so we can make credit. So it's a vicious circle. Like in World War II, when we loaned Germany money to pay, or World War I, I'm sorry. After that, after it was over, we loaned Germany money to pay Europe the money that they had to pay them in reparations, and Europe turns around and pays their war debts with that same money we just loaned Germany. It's like the same vicious circle. So without revenue, the government can't be effective. Who's going to listen to a government that can't even raise money for its own people? Nobody. Without credit, you can't borrow. You can't get credit unless you can borrow, but if you don't have credit, you can't borrow. What's up with that? So yeah, we're between the rock and the hard place, and then there's another rock coming at us, and there's nowhere to go. He proposes, now you can propose all day long, don't mean it's going to happen, that the whole $52 million federal and the $25 million Revolutionary War debt be paid in full. Now that's all nice and neat and everything, but when are you going to pay it in? Do you have any money? Can you borrow money because you don't have any credit? No, so you can't do this. He wants to design a concept to improve our creditworthiness. But you can't do that if you don't have money. You can't get money because you don't have credit. I know I'm pushing this idea a little much, but do you see the mess that we're in? So he will propose a series of taxes to help meet the government expenses, the most notorious being the whiskey tax, which was a 25% tax. 25%. So if you make $1,000 a year from making whiskey and they take 25% of that, how much are they going to take? $250, right? That's a lot of money. It's weird that that worked out because that's how much that other guy was going to have to pay. That's really weird. In 1791, Congress is going to have to create a bank. Only problem is the Constitution does not allow for the creation of a federal bank. So that's why the Constitution is interpreted so loosely at this point. So Congress approves 20-year charter for the first bank, primarily to hold government deposits. But the government doesn't have any money. Do you see the problem? You got a bank with nothing in it. They will issue banknotes that will be accepted for payment of debts. How are they going to back this? What's this made out of? Gold. What else? Silver. They're going to use gold and silver to back the money. But in the end, they will not pass all of Hamilton's programs. However, Alexander Hamilton takes nothing and turns it into something. And he worked hard for this. His program will, of course, promote the commercial sector. He lives on the coast. Why wouldn't he? Because that's the way they want the government set up. We want to be a commercial government. The semi-subsistence farmers will not gain a lot because of this. Will they gain a lot? Are they still gaining today? No, they're not. Farmers have always had trouble, until the world blows up. Then that's even more trouble. When people are looking at this program, like Alexander Hamilton is trying to start a new aristocracy. Here's a little secret. He was. He had delusions of grandeur. The money that was issued, if it had value, it was, you'd take 2 big old boxes full of money to buy this candy. That's one of them. He's also going to advise businesses and the Bank of the United States to offer stock so people will invest money. Who are the only ones that can invest money? The ones that have money. So the wealthy men buy up all the stock, and then they have to pay out all these dividends, and that really doesn't work either. The bank bill that's proposed is controversial, and even Washington doesn't want a big bank because that was one of the big problems in England. Jefferson and Madison studied the Constitution and pretty much came up with the idea that it does not give Congress the right to establish a national bank. But they're loosely interpreting this document. So who's to say they can't loosely interpret, we need this bank, it's in our power to do whatever necessary to get this country moving. So the bank will be controversial up to the point where Andrew Jackson gets rid of it entirely. They're going to also argue that the Constitution not be interpreted so vaguely, so wide. They want it narrowed. That way you keep the power in a few hands instead of a bunch. And I think we'll stop there.